it was then that I found out that my husband was a raging anti-Semite. And he
Whoa.
was not okay with me pursuing Judaism.
Oh, that took a turn. 100% of the proceeds from this monetized episode will go to support Inside Out Youth Services. That's insideoutys.org. Well, if you are ready to get officially started, I'm ready to get officially started. Usually I have my little clicker board, but I left it in my office, so we'll pretend. There we go. Well, Noelle, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you. I had posted some things in a lot of ex-Christian and ex-evangelical subreddits the other day, and a couple of people mentioned you. They said, you should interview who they called DJGhettoSteve. And I had no idea what I was going to find when I looked up that name. And I started watching your videos, and I think I responded to somebody and I said, "Oh, I love their content." And you actually hopped on, and it was really you. I was like, "What? I'm not used to like somebody that I'm talking about on Reddit hopping on and being like, 'Hey, it's me.'" That was surreal, it's so fun to put like a face and a voice to somebody we see as a little emoticon on Reddit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does mine look like me? I don't know. Does it? Kind of, maybe. I'm not sure.
Kind of, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. But that being said, please feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're about, because it's a lot as I looked into you. And then let's just kind of go from there.
Okay. So I was raised a independent, regular Baptist missionary kid until I was about 11, 12 years old. My parents then left missions and got, normal secular jobs. And I was homeschooled throughout all of that, all the way up until college. I did go to college for a couple of years and then eventually ran out of money before I get finished. So, But after college, I almost immediately cut ties with the evangelical church. I had been questioning things for years, and really something that kind of cemented things that I was moving away was when I was a freshman in college. I was actually going to a pretty conservative evangelical university. It wasn't just a Bible college, they did actually do real degrees. And so I was there studying science and history, and I was in the honors program. We had a few different classes, but primarily the one that impacted me the most was the philosophy class. So I was exposed to, existentialism and nihilism and everything else under the sun. I read so much Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir and all this stuff, and I just was incredible, like mind blowing, like, wow, these are other perspectives and that I had never had the opportunity to involve myself with or discover or consider the validity of. And in that class, our professor, unlike a lot of professors that you will have at a Christian university, he always said, "I do not need to agree with your premise. I need you to be able to support your premise." And so I always got amazing grades in that class because, yeah, I absolutely had, the different writings that I was relating to, and I had all of my quotes from various philosophers and the reason why I came to all of my premises, theses in these papers. And while I don't think my professor agreed with like any of them, he respected that I was sincerely intellectually curious and I was doing the work to put legs underneath those platforms. And so it was really validating for me to finally do some sort of study that is outside of the doctrinal dogma that I had been raised with, because growing up, my parents always said, test everything against the spirit. So no matter who
Wow.
told you what, you were supposed to test it against the Bible and the Holy Spirit and
Right.
come to your own conclusion. However, if you came to a conclusion that was outside of the statements of faith and doctrines and dogma that our church held, you were wrong.
Oh no.
And so, even though there was this, push for intellectual curiosity and to actually do the work yourself and to work out your own faith in fear and trembling, when I started coming to other conclusions, it wasn't okay. But then in college, I've got this philosophy professor that is allowing me to examine and to explore all of these different things and actually allowing me to come to other conclusions and say, yes,
Right.
I don't agree with you, but you have very good support for the premise that you are making. And
And
so,
I'm shocked that that was at a conservative faith-based university. Because when you started telling me about the reading you were doing, I was like, wait a second, I'm glad, don't get me wrong, but I'm just was not expecting that, I guess, because normally in schools that are faith-based, the readings that you do are the books of the Bible or books about the Bible or books written by megachurch pastors or famous people from
yep.
the Bible. That's interesting. So you went to this conservative Christian university. And then by the time you were through with your time there, did you kind of know at that point that you were no longer religious? Were you on the fence? What was that like?
I was in a very gray area for a while. I knew that I did not adhere to the beliefs and all of the practical applications of things that the churches that I had gone to believed in. I wasn't sure if that meant that I was an atheist or an agnostic, or if there was a different faith that would speak to
Right.
me. I really didn't know. So at the time, right out of college, I got married to a guy, which surprises a lot of people that know me now.
Yep.
But we got married, and he was a very staunch atheist. He had been raised Lutheran, and so he still had some of that religious upbringing, but not to the severity that I did. And so he was very, very anti-faith anything. So for the first few years that we were together, I was, very happily just living my life, doing the atheist thing, not worrying about God, not worrying about religion, just kind of taking time to enjoy my early 20s, to enjoy those first few years of marriage, to, really get out there and just start figuring out who I was. And I was like, I'll get to the faith stuff eventually. Well, then after a few years, I really started feeling the lack of the community involvement that you have when you're in an evangelical church.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I really need to start looking for ways that I can find other people that have similar spiritual practices or spiritual beliefs. And so I was like, okay, I know at this point Christianity is not the thing for me. So where do I go? And so I did a lot of comparative study of various world religions. And initially, I really fell in love with Druidry. My ancestry is Scottish. And
That's
so
cool.
on a lark, I was like, hey, let's check out Druidry. And I really had a fun like year and a half exploring that, and really got to the end, and I was like, I see a lot of benefits in some of these certain practices. The meditation and the grounding and stuff was really good for my mental health. But overall, I'm like, this just really, it doesn't speak to me on a spiritual level. So I kept looking, and eventually I landed on Judaism, and I absolutely fell in love with the way that they are very serious about the intellectual component of
Yes,
faith, and
absolutely.
that you are to study, especially if you're a convert, because you've got to learn Hebrew.
Yes.
You've got to learn a new liturgy. You've got to make sure you say the right prayer when you're in the bathroom. It's a whole thing. And so I was like, yes, I'm ready to tackle this. Like, let's get all the resources I can and just dive in. It was then that I found out that my husband was a raging anti-Semite. And he
Whoa.
was not okay with me pursuing Judaism.
Oh, that took a turn.
Yes, I did
Wow.
not expect that from him. I mean, at that point,
It's
we'd
not
been
something you
together for
think
like
you
6 years.
right. It's not something you think you have to clarify with somebody.
No,
You're like,
not at
sorry,
all.
that didn't come up. I didn't think to ask you how you felt.
So between the disagreements that we had on faith, the continued growth in myself, realizing that I am way gay, and the continuing a relationship with a man, just I'm like, we can have a companionate marriage. And he was like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. So I said, okay. And eventually we did split. We were together for about 11 years.
Wow.
And right before we split, I came out to my parents. So I'm almost 30 years old. I'm finally coming out to my family. I had explicitly hid, like compartmentalized my life, kept them out of anything that would let them know that I was queer. And I just could not be that vulnerable with them, because with my upbringing and everything that I had heard them say about LGBT people
Right.
growing up, I knew it was going to be bad news. So for my safety, I knew better than to say anything when I was in junior high and high school. For the protection of relationships that I had with my siblings, I didn't say anything in my early 20s. And so finally I'm 30. I'm like, you know what? I need to rip this Band-Aid off. My siblings are all adults. Like, we all have our own relationships now. It's safe. So I did about 9 months of therapy to practice and like get ready for this. And initially when I came out, they were incredibly supportive. They had questions about,
Interesting.
are you going to leave your husband? Which at this time I didn't think I was. They were concerned about STDs. And I was like, trust me, on the like spectrum of risk profiles, women
Right.
sleeping with women is
Right.
you don't need to worry. I'm not doing
Right.
IV drugs. We're fine. So I thought everything was good. And then my husband leaves me. I got a girlfriend, and I did the typical lesbian thing and like immediately moved her in with me.
Right.
And they were not excited about that, but I really wasn't sure how much of that was due to the fact that she was a woman, or how much of it was, hey, we think you're getting into a new relationship too
Right.
fast.
Right.
And it really felt like it was mostly because she was a woman, because they kept trying to introduce me to guys.
Right.
So fast forward about 8 or 9 months. My sister is about to get married. I was supposed to be her maid of honor. And my dad calls me and tells me that it was a longer conversation, but the gist of it was, you are an unrepentant homosexual and you are dead
Whoa.
to the family.
Whoa.
You need to come back to Christ. Basically, we would be more than happy to take you into our home, help you get on your feet, help you get a new job, go back to school if you want, whatever. But you have to leave your girlfriend and you have to renounce homosexuality. And I
Wow.
was
So
like,
we'll
well,
help you be successful in life and get an education and keep a roof over your head if you lied to all of our faces and just pretend to be something you're not for money, because that's God would prefer that for sure. That's
absolutely.
wow. Now,
So that
did you at any point did you personally struggle with your religious background and your budding sexuality? Was that ever, or were you pretty sure about it up front? Were you like, well, this is who I am?
So when I was 8 years old, I had a crush on my best friend, and I really wanted to kiss her. And I knew at that age, I didn't have the words really for it, but I knew that if I was going to kiss anybody, I should want to kiss a boy, not a girl. And so I had heard kids talk about using gay as a slur. And so I generally vaguely knew what that meant. And so I was like, oh no, am I gay? I gay? What do I do with that? I mean, I was 8 years old. I did not know what to do with that. And so I basically just shoved it down and said, I'm going to keep praying to God to raise me into a, godly, upstanding Christian woman. And, we're just going to hope that this is just a weird
Pray
thing.
the gay
I'm just
away.
being weird. I'm 8 years old.
Yep.
Well, then I hit like 12, 13, and, you're getting into puberty. And because at that point, my parents were out of missions, I was doing like sports and theater and music lessons and stuff. So I was involved with a lot more people than I had been while I was growing up.
Right.
And so there, of course, was a girl that I got a crush on. And I was like, oh no, I thought we prayed this away. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I've been nothing but sincere in my faith and sincere in following what Christ wants us to do. And so I was panicking. I was like, this was 1993, 94. And so all I had heard about gays thus far was that we were predators, we were pedophiles, we were murderers, we were going to die of AIDS young and all this stuff. So I thought, oh my gosh, all these awful things are going to happen to me if I don't like fix myself by the time I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And so I just doubled down on the praying the gay away. I got some internet access at the library and did some very quick, quiet searching for assistance in this area. And of course, I come up against Focus on the Families, Love One Out, and Love in Action. And so, of course, those were horribly destructive resources for me to have. And they just basically told me that, yeah, you're going to turn into this awful person if you don't fix yourself. And here's some tips and ways to help fix yourself. And one of those was to like pinch yourself or snap a rubber band or something whenever you had a homosexual thought or attraction or something. And let me tell you, I am very glad that it was only that level of things. And I was never actually in a conversion therapy center where they took much more drastic actions. But it still really messed me up because all the way through high school, like it's not going anywhere. I'm not developing crushes on guys. I tried to fabricate those same feelings towards guys, and it failed miserably.
So how was it then being married to a man? What made you decide to marry him?
It was really weird. I actually met him. I had just gotten back to my hometown after school, and I was snowboarding constantly because we were like half an hour away from a ski resort. And so I was up there on the mountain every single day, and there was this really cute lifty. Like, I don't know what it is, but something about his smile and his eyes, because that was like literally all I could see. I was just like, wow, okay, must talk to this guy. And it was the first time that I had really been like, oh my God, I really feel something from this guy. I was like, holy cow, maybe I'm finally making it, right?
Hallelujah.
And so I gave him my phone number, and he called me, and we started dating and hooked up and stuff. And initially I had thought, well, this is just going to be a booty call. I'm only going to be in this town for X number of months before I move to a bigger city. And so I'm just looking for something fun in the meantime. But we would sit around and we would talk about politics or our values or the things that were important to us in friendship and in goals and things, and we were just so closely aligned. We literally would just bring up a topic, the other one would respond, and the first person would be like, holy cow, are you serious? You feel that way too? And so I was like, okay, maybe this could actually be something more. So after a couple weeks, I told him, I said, look, I'm pretty sure that I am bisexual. And so if we are going to continue forward, especially if we're going to have anything serious and long-term, I need to be able to date women as well. So, I don't want this to be, you and I have threesomes with people or anything like that. I was like, I need to be able to go out. Right. I need to go out separately and be able to explore this part of myself that I have not had the freedom to, or have not been able to give myself the freedom to do so. And I was just so nervous. I was terrified to ask that of him, because I mean, of all things, to ask for a non-monogamous relationship in the
Right.
early aughts
Right.
was unheard of.
Right. Nowadays,
So,
it's pretty commonplace, but at the time, I feel like
correct.
I never met anybody who did it before 2013.
Exactly. So I was like, this is really what I need in order for us to be able to have something long term, because I'm not going to put it on a back burner and wait
Right.
until we break up and then go date
Right.
women. I was just like, that's not the jam. And to my surprise, he was incredibly supportive. He never pushed for it to be a threesome thing or where he needed to be involved.
Wow.
About a year later, a little less than a year later, we moved to a larger city, a big metro area in my same state. And we were going to bars and just kind of getting the feel of the city. Neither of us had lived there before. And he started being my wingman at the bar. And so, like, if he saw a girl that looked even vaguely gay, he'd be like, hey, so there's
Hey.
this girl over here, Noelle. She's like this, and you might want to talk to her. And so my first girlfriend I actually met because he facilitated that, being my wingman at the bar, because I was too introverted to actually
Yeah.
like go
It's
up to
just,
people.
it's wild to me to find out that this person ended up being a raging anti-Semite.
Right.
Like, you would never,
Right.
like, I would have never asked how they felt about Jewish people, because that's wild. It's like, yes, I will allow my girlfriend and my wife to go out and date other people, but better not be Jewish. They better not.
Right.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was wild, because yeah, he was super, inclusive and understanding of people. Now granted, trans people he really wasn't comfortable with, but in my 20s I wasn't super comfortable with the
Right.
concept of trans identities.
Right.
I was very sincere in my belief that I needed to find a way to redefine femininity and womanhood in order
Right.
to make it my own and make it something that I was comfortable
Right.
identifying as.
Right. So it
Um,
sounds like you had gone through years of work and searching and trying and finding, and all of the, you even came out to your partner, not even sure how they were going to take it, all for it to culminate in your family saying, by the way, we've apparently had a meeting without you at some point, and you're dead to us.
yeah.
And at that point, did you consider yourself non-binary, or did you still consider yourself bisexual at that point? What was your identity at the time?
So at that time, I definitely had switched from bisexual to lesbian. I did still identify as a woman, because the concept of non-binary was nowhere near my.
Right.
So I was like, I'm definitely not a guy. I'm
Right.
100% not a guy. Not super comfortable with being a woman, but
Right.
definitely not a guy. So therefore, I must be a woman. And I struggled hard in that next year. I did buku amounts of therapy. I was in support groups. I was journaling. I was reading. I was doing all the things. And my goal at the time was, I really hope that at some point my family comes back and says, we're sorry. We should not have said those things. That is not truly how we feel. We do love you. We want you to be part of our lives.
Yeah.
And, try to work towards reconciliation. So I said, my job then is to find validation in myself, the ability to forgive them before they have asked for forgiveness.
Right. It'll just eat you up if you don't.
Exactly. And so after about a year of them being completely no contact,
Right. And you had not
most of
gotten to
my
be in your sister's wedding, right? That was probably
nope.
next.
I I was forbidden to even attend her wedding, let alone stand up front with her. And they told me this, I think maybe a month before the wedding.
I was going to say, it almost sounds like they kind of already had a plan B for her, knowing they were going to give you this news. I'm just saying, it doesn't sound like she was probably missing a maid of honor that day.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So, during that year, yeah, buku therapy, lots of work on myself. And I really did get to a point to where I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. If they come to me, I'll be available. I'm not going to reach out to them. I will make them come to me. I'm not going to be begging them to be like, hey, please accept me again. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to be who I am. And if and when they are ready, they will come back to me. And so then we had one of my cousins died. He had some mental health issues and some addiction issues. And so we lost him. And I think that was kind of a wake up call for my mom, at least, because I think a week after he died, she reached out to me and she started apologizing for the things that were said, and that they understand that they can't take back what was said, but things that were said should never have been said, and they were very sorry and wanted me back in their lives, and they wanted to be a family again and all this. And she was like, we're going to have this funeral and memorial service for your cousin, and I'd really like you to be there. And because of the work that I had done, I was able to say, yes, absolutely, I'm there. However, I have one rule. Do not proselytize me.
Yep.
Do not try to get me to come back to the church.
I was going to say, they're trying to get you to come back. I knew it.
Exactly. So I was like, do not just, I am more than happy to be in your lives. I am, however, not going to do the Christian things because I am not Christian. Right. I mean, at that point, I was a couple years into my exploration of Judaism. And so I was pretty sure that was going to be my faith going forward. And I just didn't want to deal with the constant Bible study invites and, oh, let me buy you this Max Lucado book. And I just wasn't there for that. So right. We move forward, and we have a lot of like family discussions and, very vulnerable emotional discussions where we, really tried to get back on the same page with one another. And I feel like we did a pretty decent job. In the 10 years since then, I have had to about once a year reaffirm that boundary of, no, I am not going to interact with you if you are going to evangelize me.
Right.
And so that usually looked like restating, no, this is not what I'm interested in. Please stop doing this. And then I just wouldn't talk to them for several weeks. I would give myself a breather, take some space, and then, re-engage with something simple like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, so let's grab lunch, or let's go grab coffee, And that has, for the most part, worked for me, at least. In the last couple of years, they kind of amped up their evangelism routine because
you'd think it'd be the opposite after some time.
But so the girlfriend that I had gotten U-hauled with very shortly after my first divorce, we ended up being together for about 7 years, and then we got divorced. Okay. There's a lot more to that story, but has absolutely nothing to do with the topic at hand. So I will just say that thankfully, after 7 years, I got out, and I have done a lot of healing in the meantime. And I think that they took that divorce as an opportunity to say, hey, you're reconstructing your life. Maybe you want to do it with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I have had to say no. And at this point, I am much further into my conversion to Judaism. I'm actually working with a synagogue. I daven regularly with my my congregants and everything. I have a rabbi that I talk to, but I was able to say, look, my beliefs are XYZ. And I sent them an email last December, basically explaining, I understand what you want for me. I understand that you want me to have a godly marriage like you have, because it has worked so well for you. I mean, they have been married for 44 years, I believe, very happily married. They have
That's
been
good.
each other's ride or die. Like, they are such good support for one another. And so I can understand that they would want me to have that same kind of supporting, loving relationship that
Right.
they have. However, I am not going to find that with a man.
Right. And you know that about yourself.
Exactly. I know that for a fact at this point in time in my life. So no, it is not going to come from a man. And secondarily, I understand that you want me to have a relationship with God. I understand that you want to see me in heaven. I understand these things. However, again, I have too much trauma that is wrapped up in evangelicalism, in Christianity.
Right.
I simply cannot be vulnerable and worship in that type of a context.
Right.
And so let me explain to you, when you do XYZ, I do ABC. And here's how I get those same spiritual fulfillment, that same emotional comfort, that same community comfort. Here's how I get all of those things. And it is just as important and real to me as your faith is to you.
Right.
And I said, I'm just, it was like a Bernie Sanders commercial. Once again, I am asking you to please stop evangelizing me.
Right. Right. And it's always wild to me with families like that or friends like that, where they say, we want you to be happy. We want you to be fulfilled. We want you to find love. We want you to be mentally healthy. And you say, wonderful. This is the way that I find love. This is the way that I view myself. This is the way that I find peace. This is my version of worship. And they always go, no, but not like that. No, but not like that. And like knowing full well that if you went into the church with them and you sat on the pew and you bend your knee and you pray the prayer and you sing the song, that you're faking it for whatever reason in people's minds. That's better than all the times that you can just, your head can just spin, where you're like, you keep saying you want these things for me, and here I am spelling out exactly how I get those things, and you are ignoring them because it's not what you want. So I need you to at least admit you don't actually want those things for me. You want them in your way for me. You want them your preferred way. You don't want the baseline feelings and experiences for me, because if you did, you'd be happy for me because I found them in a way that does not align with what you want.
Correct.
And I just wish that people would be honest about that. I wish they would just say, yeah, you're right. My way or the highway. Like, sure.
Exactly.
Because at least that's honest.
When I was in high school, I overheard a conversation between my parents. I think I was probably 17 at the time. And so I was coming up the stairs. They hadn't heard me. They were talking in the kitchen. And my dad was talking about how I really needed to be given some freedom to make my own decisions and kind of work on spreading my wings before I am out of the house all of the way. My mom said, "Oh no, we can cut those wings right off."
Yes. How? what was this? Like, elaborate on what that plan is, mother. Exactly.
And so it's been weird because it seems like as an adult, my mom has been much more willing to engage with me on the level that I'm actually at. Like, she has actually asked me in the last year, at least, since the big email, she has actually had some conversations with me about, like, she asked me once if I believe in the same God as they do. And I wanted to be like, is that a serious question? Because, they're both Abrahamic religions. They're both talking about Jehovah, Yahweh, whatever.
It's amazing how
It's the
many
same.
evangelical people who say that they know the Bible in and out don't actually know the Bible in and out. They don't actually know these things.
Yeah. And so I've had some good discussions with her, just trying to very gently and in bite-sized pieces kind of convey to her how my spirituality is really not any different. It might look a little bit different. Obviously, it sounds different because I pray in Hebrew now, but it's very much the same. It's just that I needed a different context in order to have a healthy relationship with God. Um, I have the exact same values that I have
Right.
this whole time. Being in service to others has always been like the number one driver in my life. I was a major volunteer person. I was actually a missionary for a short period of time.
Wow.
I have done so much activism and volunteering and stuff throughout my whole life. And in all of my career choices, I have said, is this a job where I will be able to help people? Will I actually make a positive influence on other people's lives by doing this job? And so 90% of my job decisions have been made on that core belief that I should be serving others. Now,
Right.
my therapist will tell you that I have to reel that in a bit, and I
Right.
have to remember that my needs matter too, and
Yes.
that there is purpose when you are not doing something that is
Right.
necessarily a direct benefit to somebody else's life.
Right. You're allowed to be alive and also be only serving yourself on occasion. It's allowed.
Correct. It
Yeah.
is. It absolutely is. And so I've really gotten to this great place to where, I mean, I've struggled with mental health for a very, very, very long time. Obviously, I had depression and anxiety as junior high and high school. I actually had an unaliving attempt once when I was in high
Wow.
school, once when I was in college. And then as an adult, I finally got actual professional mental health services and got diagnosed with bipolar, panic disorder, generalized trauma, and a bunch of other stuff. And so it has been a long, like 15 years of trying to get the therapy right, get the coping skills right, get the habits and my routine in life right. And having that spiritual component was a huge piece of the puzzle. And
Right.
being able to pray with my synagogue and to focus only on what I want to say to God and not worrying about purity culture, anti-LGBT stuff. I don't have to deal with any of that. I get to
Right.
just focus on my relationship with God.
Right.
And the way that my family has pushed against that has been very frustrating because of how instrumental it has been in my healing.
Right.
I
And
actually
you
had,
have a relationship with God. It sounds like you have this relationship. It'd be one thing if you said, I am a staunch atheist, God isn't real. You know how everybody thinks atheists are, like,
right,
burn to the ground. But you have this relationship. And just like in your personal life, the relationships that you have are not the relationships that they want you to have. Doesn't matter how much it's helping your mental health, doesn't matter how much you're healing, it doesn't matter how much you've thought about it and worked on it and like dove deep within yourself and determined that this is you in your most authentic version. It's not the kind of relationship they want you to have, therefore it's invalid.
right,
It's
exactly.
just so sad.
I I had an aunt who earlier this year had been inviting me to these Bible studies about women from the Old Testament. And I kept messaging her and saying, hey, please don't invite me to these things. I am Jewish. I do not need to know the Christian perspective on these people. And she was like, well, I really thought since it was Jewish women, you'd be interested. And I'm like, I am interested in Jewish women, but I learn about them from my temple. I
Right.
don't need to learn about them from your Bible study. And at one point, I had to call her out publicly on Facebook because she kept tagging me in things on Facebook.
Wow.
And so I was in the comments of this post, like, I have asked you repeatedly, please stop inviting me to these things. I do not want the Christian version of whatever it is that y'all are trying to sell. And so some of her lady friends from church, little old church ladies, hopped into the comments on Facebook with me, and they were asking, well, why wouldn't you be interested in this? Like, just mind blown. Can't understand why I would not be interested in this. And I told one of them that I follow Reform Judaism. And she was like, what is that? Is that Islam? And I'm like, no, it means I'm Jewish. And she was like, oh, Jewish. And I still had to do more explaining to them and everything. And it was very cute, but at the same time, it was very, very exemplary of the problem that you run into with these people, because they are just so focused on their perspective in the world, and anybody who has anything outside of that, it is just unthinkable, unimaginable. How in earth could this happen unless you're a Satanist? There's just no middle ground.
Yes. And I find that exact attitude is similar in when you're talking about sexuality, when you're talking about religion, when you're talking about politics, especially with the older generations. Your part of you is like, I want them to know that I am grateful that they're thinking about me. And in a weird, like, separate me 10 times, I see where they're coming from, and I see where they would make that connection. I get it. I'm grateful. Thank you. I see this as your way of trying to embrace me. But at the same time, it is so misguided and so misinformed that part of you is like, I really want them to understand. And then the other part of you is like, I'm so tired of having this conversation over and over and over again. You know, they talk about a lot of times when, especially in conversations about like marginalized individuals, part of you wants to teach people, and part of you is so tired of it being your job to teach people. Part of you is like, I wish everybody understood this. And then the other part of you is like, I just want to get on Facebook and not be tagged in a thing that I've said I'm not interested. Like, can I just not teach you today? Can I just have the day? Yeah. So it's very, and then you hear the people that are like, well, they were just trying to connect with you. That's all they was trying to do, is they were just trying. And you're just like, and it's just so it's just difficult.
I have struggled with this a little bit with my therapist, because anytime I get ready to have any kind of significant conversation with my family, I'm always chatting about it in therapy beforehand, so we can kind of practice not just how I'm going to say it, but the coping skills that I'm going to use, because we do not know exactly what the response is going to be.
Right.
Well, I have gotten to where my therapist is always asking me, she's like, okay, do they really need to get you on this, or do you need to accept that they are just not going to get you on this? And you just got to let it go. And so we drilled down on that for a while, and I was like, I really feel like it is my evangelical upbringing. I was raised to convince people to think like I do, especially on matters of faith. And so now that I am a different faith from all of my extended family, I feel like I am constantly evangelizing to them, but not in that I want them to be Jewish with me. I just want them to respect that I am this faith, and it is equally valid to their faith. And so I'm having to really kind of unlearn a lot of those evangelical urges to try and get my point across, and just recognize, like, you just got to cut your losses and go. Right.
Proselytizing. I grew up Baptist, and proselytizing really teaches you that if you keep pressing, you'll win. They won't be able to say no, you'll win. Like, keep going. And it also plants that seed in your brain that says, if you don't win, if you don't work hard enough and get them on your side, they go to hell. So think about that when you're ready to give up telling them your message. So now, even in these other aspects of your life, you're not even a Christian anymore. That little piece in your brain still tells you, something bad is going to happen if you don't make sure that they understand 1,010% what you're trying to say. So you better win.
Exactly. It sets up this zero-sum game where it is black and white. And the number one thing that I have struggled with as an adult is my first 18, 19 years, everything was absolutely black and white on everything, right? Yep. And so then I actually get into adulthood. I am actually experiencing life. I am paying bills. I am working jobs. I am making friends. And everything is gray. Everything is gray.
Like shades of gray. Just all the different shades of gray. There's no black, there's no white. It's just a whole bunch of gray shades.
Exactly.
Yeah. So has your family seen your YouTube channel?
I am not sure. I know at one point in time, my dad followed my YouTube channel back when I posted dog videos and anime music videos, like 14 years ago. So he may still follow. I do not know. No one has said a single thing.
It doesn't come up.
One of my main like format that I'm trying to go with is that I will have opinion videos where I talk about the Christian view of mental health or the Christian view of LGBTQ. I recently did a really difficult video about the decades of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric that came specifically from Focus on the Family, which is again right here in Colorado Springs with Club Q.
Right.
And really following that. So I do have some on there that is very much I am placing moral judgments upon things that are being done and said in the name of Christ. However, my main series has been about denominations and creeds, confessions, statements of faith, missions organizations, and I have been very careful to try and take an anthropological view of it. So it is not me saying, well, this version of Christianity is wrong because I don't like XYZ.
Right.
It's literally just, okay, these people believe this. These people believe very similarly, but they differ on this. And these people split off to create this other group in 1745 or whatever.
Yeah.
The only time I really got controversial, we'll say, was in my missions videos. I will tell my friends that are not religious, I'm like, missions is just colonizing for Jesus. And so I definitely explored.
Where's the lie though?
Yeah.
I mean, I see the lies.
I talked about, the way that indigenous cultures have been supplanted with Christianity. And while they have claimed that they were there to civilize these indigenous tribes, they have actually replaced things like ritualistic murder with burning witches at the stake. So we're still getting the same amount of uncivilizedness. It's just under the wrapping of Jesus now.
Right.
And so I really talked a lot about colonizing and why that can be problematic. And it's fine to want to share your beliefs with others, but I feel like you really cross a boundary when you ignore laws, you ignore safety. And you ignore people specifically telling you, we don't want you here.
Right.
And you say, no, I really got to go there and I got to make them Christian.
No, it's not.
I have issues with that.
Right. And I know, at least in my, I feel like Bible Belt Christian upbringing, they try to convince you. And I also blame rom-coms a little bit, because rom-coms are like, no, please just keep saying yes, even though they say no. Chase her through an airport, like throw it at her. It's just with a Bible. And it's very much that way. It's like, no, that's the devil telling them no. The more they say no, the more you're getting to them, So keep going. And it's just like, let's talk about consent. Consent is very important. And so Yeah. So do you think there will ever be a point in your life where you are not religious of any kind? Or do you find that you're pretty confident in Judaism as like a religion for you?
I mean, I could see it theoretically as a possibility just because I have had so many different stops on the way to where I am right now. And I never want to say that I am completely done with my exploration, with
Mhm.
my discovering of myself. I never want to say I'm completely done with that. But having said that, I am very I have really kind of assimilated my life around Jewish culture. Now,
It sounds
granted,
like it.
I'm a bad Jew. I do eat sausage. Um, but I try to follow most everything else, and I really find so much, just so much beauty and so
Yeah.
much joy in expressing that faith and
Yeah.
having people to share that faith with. And so I don't really see myself as being able to completely get away from a faith of some sort,
Yeah.
um unless of course I somehow join like the Church of Dungeons and Dragons, and
Yeah.
like I just have never
Yeah.
ending game groups, that
Yeah.
might pull me away. But no, I had a death in the family recently, and grieving the loss of Club Q people.
Right.
But I spent like 2 hours with the Mourner's Kaddish and Ose Shalom, which are like my two favorite prayers of all time, and just singing those over and over to myself as I cried. Like it was exactly that spiritual succor that I used to get when I
Right.
would read Isaiah, or I would spend time in deep concerted prayer with a spiritual mentor or something. I I still get those moments of comfort and joy and beauty and fulfillment.
Right.
And so I feel like as long as I am getting that, as long as Judaism is bringing something beautiful to my life, I
Yeah.
think it will always be a part of me, at least in some form or fashion.
Right. And I think that what you're describing is what people seek when they become religious. I think that exact feeling is what people seek. And unfortunately, not all religions stop there. They get you with that first, I know, especially in a lot of Christian denominations, come on, brother, come on, sister, we're like, come on our side. It's great. It's good. And then they've got you for long enough that they start saying things that you don't necessarily just agree with at all, but because everybody that you care about and has been so kind to you and so welcoming, and so the vibe has been so great, until then you just kind of go with it. And I think what you're describing is what I would say if I were a religious person, that would be the kind of religion I would want to be in. I would want to be
Mhm.
in a peaceful religion that brings me peace in times of sadness and times when we're confused, like, why did this happen? Why was this allowed to happen? How could these people that have done nothing to anybody have, like you said, like Club Q? And I think that is where religion should be. And if people are involved in religions that are like that for them, be it Christianity, be it any kind of sect from Islam or Judaism, that sounds beautiful. And that, I think, is
Mhm.
what so many people are searching for when they end up in these fundamentalist cult like things, because again, it starts that way. You're like, oh, people just like me, I feel welcome here. And then the next thing you know, it's, I don't really agree with that, but everybody here does, so I'm not going to say anything. And then somebody's asking me if I believe that, and because nobody else does, I'm going to say I don't either. So now people know publicly that I don't agree with that, and then it just goes from there. Um, and it's just so sad because what you're describing sounds so beautiful and so
Mhm.
lovely and so necessary, especially in a time like right now. I feel like,
Yeah.
especially in our country, people could benefit from the what you have found in Judaism so immensely. And what you're
Mhm.
talking about with like therapy and like and getting mental health help, like that kind of beautiful self-exploration is so important. And I just wish that every religion had that same impact
Yeah.
on people, as opposed to these weird, angry people. You're like, you're talking to me about God. Why are you so angry? And it just sounds like they're missing exactly what you're talking about. And they probably went there looking for that. And it's just so sad. It's so sad. Tell us a little bit about Inside Out Youth Services and the things that you mentioned you have going on with them.
Yes. So Inside Out Youth Services is one of the handful of local LGBTQ affirming youth organizations. They primarily do like support groups and peer support groups. It's not so much led by a therapist, but kids of general, I think it's 14 to 25 that can get together in groups of their own ages and talk to other people that are gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary, whatever that may be. And so they get to be in a safe space and are able to have those conversations that they may not be safely able to have in other contexts. A lot of the kids that come in are referred to them by their therapist, and so their parents are supportive in bringing them in. But some of the kids, like on Reddit in the last month, there's been a big uptick in LGBT kids coming out on Reddit saying, hey, I really need community. Where can I find community? And me and a bunch of other people are always like, inside out, inside out, inside out. Because on top of those like peer support groups that they have on a regular basis, they will also do things like queer prom and silent discos and other stuff that's just fun for the kids to do. And so they get to be around not just a bunch of cis straight kids from their high school or whatever that maybe bully them for being LGBT. They actually get to be with people who share that connection and they get it. And they're with a bunch of adults that get it. And so having that support, I mean, community is everything. Absolutely everything. We are not islands unto ourselves. We are not healthy when we are just solo. I think the pandemic was an excellent example of that. We need people. We need each other. And online support groups are great. I absolutely have a number of those myself that I have really appreciated. But having some place like in person where, you can have a dinner together, or you can call somebody because you're having a really bad, shitty week, and having that community that you can go to for people who are in your own marginalized group and get it is so critical. I think that is instrumental in helping to alleviate a lot of the suicide issues that we see with LGBT youth. I particularly like Inside Out because they are more focused on the community aspect. We have The Place and a couple of other organizations that focus more on LGBT youth homelessness and things like that. But Inside Out is very much about creating community, and that's really where I have been most moved, I guess I should say. So what I am doing for Inside Out, I currently have this is just the basic beginner, but I have a bonfire link with Colorado Springs Strong images on t-shirts and stuff. And all of the proceeds will go directly to Inside Out Youth Services. I am also, because bonfire is not the most... It's not terribly friendly platform if you want to have a number of designs. If you've got one design, they're your people. But for more than one design, they're not great. So I am also building out a website where I will have a different print on demand service that will funnel through and can do t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, stickers, postcards, prints to hang on your wall.
That's
And we're
awesome.
starting with a lot of poetry
Ooh.
that deals with grief and moving forward to hold those people in our hearts and see hope and community going forward. So we have a lot of poetry about that, and just kind of all of us processing our grief through art. And so that's my
Yes.
like first run of everything. And then after the first of the year, I am looking to do some additional runs that are a little bit more hopeful and focus more on the community that we
Yeah.
have with each other and really celebrating
Yeah.
those things. But I felt it was important for us as artists to have that kind of outlet to really, I don't know, as an artist, sometimes you can only really feel your feelings if you can connect with it in a creative way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so having that, I did all the graphic design, my friends that
That's
are
so cool.
poets did all of the poetry. And so we put everything together, and it was really helpful for all of us, and we're really excited about moving
Yeah.
forward with it. So
And what would somebody search to find it?
so for the bonfire, you just go to bonfire.com/we are club Q. And for the other website that I am starting, I don't have the domain reserved on
Right.
that just yet. So
I
that'll
figured
be
that would be,
forthcoming,
yeah,
but
that would be later.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that's so cool. I just wanted to say that it has been an honor to talk to you and talk to you about these, all these various programs. Because when I Googled your name, so many different things came up. And then even in your YouTube bio, there's just so many links. I literally wrote in my notes, find all the links in the YouTube bio. Um, if you could, in kind of closing, give a message to somebody listening to this who may not know who they are in terms of their faith, may not know who they are in terms of their gender identity or their sexuality, or maybe they know all of those things, but they don't know what to do with that information. Be they young, maybe they're closer to my age, but still they don't want to lose their family members. What would you say to somebody who could just use advice on how to figure out who they are and where to go from here?
I will harp on this till the cows come home. Community, community,
I was about to
community.
say, I bet community.
It was when I was able to start having more conversations with trans and non-binary people about how they came to figure out that they were trans and non-binary, that things finally kind of clicked for me. And I was like, "Ooh, wait, you mean I can just call myself non-binary and not have to deal with trying to constantly
Yes.
redefine femininity?" Awesome. When I found community with other polyamorous individuals, I was able to have really in-depth discussions about what that meant for me. What were my boundaries? What were my needs? What was I looking for? What were my goals? And so by having those deep conversations with other people that are in these little niche areas of your life that you are trying to figure out, I mean, conversation can never be a bad thing
No.
when it is inclusive and honest and open. And being able to be truly authentic and vulnerable with people is so important, because it is in those moments that you have your epiphanies and that you really have the light bulb come on and say, "Oh, that is the thing,
Yes.
that is the thing." And so
Yes.
whether that has been figuring out my faith, figuring out my sexuality, figuring out my gender, figuring out what I want to do when I grow up, like all of that has been answered when I go to my community and I am able to engage in really substantive discussions.
Yes, 100%. I've mentioned before on the podcast, um, those discussions literally changed my life because I
Mhm.
went into college, conservative, Republican, Christian girl, and all it took was people very patiently being like, "You seem like you have very strong feelings about this thing. Why?" And me being like, uh, 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 uh. and like not knowing why, not having any idea, because
Exactly.
I'd never been forced to get past that point. I had to say was like, cause Jesus, or cause, cause I don't know, George W. Bush is right. And everybody else had either just agreed or been like, oh, okay. And I recognize now, just like, not talk to me anymore. Right. And
Yes.
right. There's okay. Yeah, that's great. You have, and all it took was patient, kind people that I liked
Mhm.
and I thought were friends with me being like, maybe you don't have a reason why you think that other than somebody told you that. What if you Googled it and found out what you really thought? And then I did. And then it turns out I didn't believe half of it. And then I was like, oh no, these labels I've been using for so long. And then you go through that period where you hang on to them. You're like, no, I don't care what Google says. This is what I believe. Damn it. Like, this is it. This is the thing. This is the part that the church warned me about, where you guys would try to turn me away. And
Exactly.
I'm steadfast, right? I'm steadfast in
Hmm.
the blood of the lamb. And then maybe you smoke some weed or do some shrooms or something like that. And then you're like, oh shit. Like, oh no, I don't believe any of that. But yeah, I could not agree with you more. Community is so important. So important. You learn so much simply by talking and listening and exposing yourself. And I'm not saying this because I'm like, you're gonna change whether you like it or not. Talk to people. I'm saying I am so glad that I changed. I'm sure you are also so glad that you came to some of the realizations that you've come to and you've changed in the ways that you have. And I sometimes wake up in like a cold sweat thinking like, what if I hadn't taken that path? Like, what if I hadn't
Hmm.
met those people, done those shrooms? Like, what if I hadn't introduced myself to those things? I wouldn't be who I am. And I love who I am today. God bless that little girl that I used to be. She was trying real hard. She was getting there, but I'm so grateful for who I am. And so, yeah, I could not agree more. Community is everything, and exposing yourself to different kinds of people and asking people what they think with the intent to listen and learn. Not to
Yes.
debate, not to argue, not to gotcha, not to quote some video you saw where the headline was like, oh, he destroys atheists or whatever, like to just regurgitate what you heard, like to ask somebody a question and to legitimately listen. Because I learned how to say that early on. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? Are you asking me because you care? Or are you asking me because you're already ready to argue with me? Because I'm tired. So if you already want to argue, we can do that another day. But if you actually want to know, I'll take the time to tell you. Yeah, it's so important. And thank you for helping me spread this community. I'm trying to make this podcast more of a community. And thank you for sending your message and for everything that you do for formerly religious people and LGBTQ individuals and just your community. I really appreciate you and people like you and the work that you do. And I hope that it just explodes from here.
I hope so too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Noelle, AKA DJGhettoSteve, thank you so much for your time. I'll give you your evening back, but I just wanted to say I've had a wonderful time talking to you, and I hope you have I was about to say immaculate, so I'll just stick with that, an immaculate evening.
That sounds like the plan.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.